In the wake of Cam Akers' injury, where are you drafting Darrell Henderson? Victoria, let's start with you. Where are you thinking about drafting Darrell Henderson now that Cam Akers is going to be missing the 2021 season?
I have Darrell Henderson currently slotted in as my RB22. I'm kind of in the middle here. I'm being a little safe, but I feel comfortable taking him over guys like Kareem Hunt, Mostert, Edmonds, ETN, maybe Mike Davis. I'm still deciding on that. Right now, I've got him ranked one spot over Mike Davis. So I'm thinking that he's an RB2. He's got the upside considering how much the Rams like to run the ball. They run in the red zone. And considering the hype that Cam Akers was garnering, though, Darrell Henderson, we might see his ADP. I expect it to rise as the coming weeks pass. As we get into our redraft drafts, if he creeps, let's say, into that third round where you can get other guys, other wide receivers like Amari Cooper, even his teammates, Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, I don't think I'm going to be spending up there if he climbs to that level. So he did have the hot hand early last season. 90 yards from scrimmage in 3 of 6 games. He had 4 touchdowns. He didn't explode. He didn't do anything crazy. But there's no signs pointing to the Rams signing a vet quite yet. All reports are saying they're going to wait it out. And I don't know. I'm thinking he'll be an RB2 with the RB1 upside with volume. But I don't see also a player coming off the street, a vet coming in, a trade for a player. Everyone's hammering for trade for James Robinson. That would be fun. But I don't think a person's going to come out the street and demand 70-80% of the work. I think Henderson has that familiarity in the offense, familiarity with the playbook, with the coaches, and he'll have the lead back role. It just might not be the volume we're thinking.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Troy, let's get your take on this. Where are you slotting in Darrell Henderson in your rankings now?
So he's going to be around like 21, 22. So he's going to be, just like Victoria said, around like the Jacobs, Mike Davis, ETN like range for me. And Victoria said like, oh, he might creep up into the third. I know he's going to creep up there, right? What's going to happen is we're going to start seeing some hype videos, in training camp. We're going to see him taking the first, reps. And then you know what? People are going to be like, RB1 season. You know how people are, right? They're getting excited. I feel like he's slowly going to creep up to where Cam Akers' ADP was, right? Just because, recency bias. And I believe that he can handle the workload. And in terms of, I don't think they're going to trade for a running back. I think they're probably going to pick up a free agent like a Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, someone like that. And if they do, I'm more confident about Darrell Henderson. If they happen to make a trade, that tells me everything I need to know about Darrell Henderson, and I'm going to drop him in my rankings. I don't see that happening. But yeah, I think he's going to be like 3rd, 4th round by the time drafts come by.
Well, I think the Rams already showed their cards a little bit as to how much they're willing to trust Darrell Henderson last year when they drafted Cam Akers. Everyone thought that it was going to be Darrell Henderson's job. Everyone was getting really excited about him. And then he, was quickly replaced by Cam Akers. And then even Malcolm Brown was working his way in there. I agree with you guys, though. I think that he is really going to start to inch his way up ADP as the offseason progresses. And the main reason for that, as silly as this sounds, he's just got a phenomenal highlight reel. I mean, he can break tackles, he can juke people. He's got some great catches that he made. And with how reactionary people are going to start seeing those hype videos. They're going to start seeing those highlights, and they're going to get really excited. So we all actually, I checked our rankings before we went on the show, and we are pretty much just, step by step with each other on this one. I've got him at 20. Troy's got him at 20. You've got him at 22. I've got him sandwiched right between David Montgomery and Josh Jacobs right now. And I think that if he can make it out of the offseason without a veteran acquisition, somebody else getting added into that backfield, I think that he can move up. And I'd have no problem, putting him ahead of some other guys in there. But right now, I think the question marks are why I'm a little bit lower on him. But I completely agree that if he makes it through unscathed this offseason, heads into week 1 as the top guy on the depth chart, now with no Malcolm Brown, no Cam Akers, I think that he should easily be slotted in as a high-end RB2. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning into another episode of Footballguys Mailbag Show. Just a reminder that you can send all of your questions into mailbag at footballguys.com, which you can see just on the right side of our screen here. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to come at you every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, and then you can see all of the other shows there as well. We're going to start with all the submitted questions that were sent to us this week, and then we will work into the chat questions. So start dropping those questions in the chat, and we will get to them at the end of the show. Before we dive into the rest of the questions, though, I just want to mention one more time that if you are a high-stakes fantasy football player, you can have a chance to win $500,000 by playing in the Footballguys Players Championship. Entry to get in is $350, or you can build 3 teams for $1,000. And on top of that $500,000 grand prize, they're giving out a total of $3.7 million in prizes. So find the league on FFPC and draft your team as soon as possible to be a part of this. All right, so we talked about Darrell Henderson and what he's doing in redraft, but let's talk a little bit about Cam Akers and what we do with him in Dynasty. We've got a question from Taylor here asking, is Cam Akers a buy, a sell, or a hold in Dynasty? Troy, why don't you start us off here?
Okay, he has to be a hold. I think he's a hold/buy, right? So here's the thing. If I don't have Cam Akers, I'm trying to buy him, right? I'm trying to buy him. But the thing about it is, like, if someone has Cam Akers, they should hold him. So it's that, it's that dynamic. But if I'm trying to buy him, because there's a lot of people who are worried about it, and for rightfully so, right? This is a serious injury. A lot of running backs that we've seen in the past don't come back from it. So hopefully, he bounces back and he recovers well. But this is the time where if somebody is willing to sell him for cheap and just doesn't want him on his roster anymore, then I would be buying. But if I have Cam Akers, I'm holding on for dear life and hoping that, next year, and again, his values is going to go down. And next year we've seen it, right? With guys like Saquon or whoever, if they're coming off an injury, their values automatically is going to be lower. So next year his value is going to be lower, but you know what? I think it's worth it because you don't want to sell him anytime soon because people are just so down on him unfortunately because of his injury.
You're saying at the right price. So let me just throw a couple instances out there. If you've got, would you trade a first-round pick for Cam Akers? If it meant that was like what you had to give up to get Cam Akers, would you give up a first-round pick for him right now?
Yes, I would.
All right. Would you give up a second? Well, then, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Give up a second round pick too. I thought we were going to work our way down, but you're just giving up a first. All right.
I thought you were asking me a trick
no
question.
Negotiating there. Victoria, I think that your stance is going to be a little bit different by that response. So what are you doing with Cam Akers? Buying, selling, or holding?
Geez, I've seen recently some pretty bad offers for Cam Akers in some group chats I've been in. People are trying to lowball the fantasy managers that have Akers, and just there's that ever inflated narrative that players cannot return after an Achilles tear, especially it's very bad for running back. We've seen Emmanuel Sanders do it for an example, but there's a very small sample size. So I don't want to lean one way or the other to say, oh, Akers never going to be a good player again. So I'm not sure if I have Cam Akers. I'm not selling him for a pack of Big League Chew and a large fountain drink. Okay. You want to hold. If people are giving you lowball offers, just hold unless you're getting what you perceive to be decent value. Like if you perceive Troy's offer for a first round pick to be good value, then go for it. If you're less risky, I would personally hold, but the same goes for the other end. If you're buying, as Troy already said, if the manager is not going to sell for cheap, unless they panicked yesterday, you might have maybe missed that little window. I did see some people just selling, worried about it. So I would throw out an offer, see how the manager's feeling. If they're tilting, maybe you can get him for a decent price.
Yeah, he's somebody like if I had to pick one of these 3 buy, sell, or hold, I guess I'd say sell because, I'm one of the people that is a little bit scared of an injury like this. It seems like and I've heard the argument that, modern medicine has changed and he can bounce back from it. And we've seen that, 10, 15 years ago, an ACL tear was basically a death sentence for a running back. And now people bounce back from them like nothing. But the Achilles, that's the one that really kind of stands out to me and scares me a little bit. And all eyes are going to be on Marlon Mack this year, even though we've got this sample size of like 15 people that have torn their Achilles in the last decade. Everybody's going to be watching Marlon Mack, and based on how he bounces back, I think is how we're going to see people handle their shares of Cam Akers. But for me personally, it's something that scares me a little bit. And if I'd be selling if there's somebody in my league like Troy. I'm not trying to, dog you on this for anything, but there are people that would give a first round pick. And if I could get a first round pick for Cam Akers right now, I'd absolutely do it and hope that I can get somebody not coming off an Achilles injury with that first round pick next year. So I think it all really depends. Yeah, I think that, there's so much uncertainty right now that you need to take your own risk tolerance and team situation. But if I had to label it, I guess I'd say a sell. Anyway, let's move on. We've got Jordan. Thank you, as always, Jordan, submitting questions every single week. Love to see it. How would you guys personally handle headlines in training camp? Are there any of your team's writers that we should be following? So, two-part question here. How do you handle headlines? And then do you guys have any beat reporters for the Bills and Dolphins that you would recommend?
So, if you don't mind, Troy, I'll start out.
Go ahead.
Jason Moore of the Fantasy Footballers once said, if you like the headline, you're going to believe it. If you don't like the headline, you will not believe it. You know, we're inherently biased as players. I love that quote so much. And we know as coaches, they're not going to be as open and honest about a player struggling unless maybe you're Urban Meyer. What has he been doing? We're not sure. But as a beat writer, if you're following your team, other teams, those are the guys that are there day in and day out watching training camp. If there's a significant battle in camp that you're looking toward, like Visca being wide receiver 1, is he going to be the number 1 option? Or are we looking at Gabe Davis versus Emmanuel Sanders? I personally am. And the beat writer saying, you know, one player is getting more looks or getting more opportunities. Then I start to lean that way once we're seeing it. Obviously, it's all talk right now. So that's my answer for the first question. My second, well, should we answer that one after? Let Troy have
go ahead. Go ahead. Who's the Bills guy that we should be following?
I like to follow Ryan Talbot and Matt Perino. They have a podcast as well called Shout. That's our Bills song. So I like to follow them.
All right. Troy, what are you doing? Let me pull this question up again. I feel bad. It's kind of blocking like half your face here.
No, look,
how do you personally handle headlines in training camp? Are you putting a lot of water behind this, or is it just, fluff for you?
Man, it's tough because it's hard not to get excited about, especially if it's your team, And I think what it is, I look at headlines, right? And I normally use it if I have a belief about something and I see a headline, it kind of just helps solidify what I already believed. It's very rare that I see a headline early in camp and I completely shift my idea, right? So it's like, if, again, an undrafted free agent, oh, he looks good in camp. Oh, he's not going to be the starter. You know what I mean? It's like I temper expectations when it's headlines like that. But, basic headlines I already felt going into it, I just reconfirms what I already felt. I don't try to put too much water on it. In terms of beat reporters, I like Cameron Wolfe. Joe Shad. I think Joe Shad's @ is Shad, SCHAD, and then Joe. And then there's Omar Kelly. I know there's people who feel, one way or another about him, but he has, reliable information. So I'd say those are the 3 guys that I normally follow for the most up-to-date information.
Yeah, I think both of you guys knocked it out of the park, and that's really what it is. Like this time of year, everybody just wants confirmation bias, and you could literally throw me any story right now and give me what the headline is, and I can spin it in a positive or a negative. That's just what it is this time of year. And you've got stories and people that you're invested in, and it's really tough to change a take in the off season. Once we start seeing football week 1, week 2, week 3, then you can kind of rescind some takes, change some takes. But this time of year, everybody's dug in. Like if you're a CEH truther, you're not going to change your tune because of a headline that comes out. And if you're fading this guy, you're not going to change it. The one thing that I will say that I pay a little bit of attention to is who these guys are taking their reps with during the offseason and during camp. So like Victoria, for instance, I'll talk about the Bills. Something that really jumped out to me is that Gabe Davis got pushed to the second team, and he was taking his practices with the second team while Emmanuel Sanders was with the first team. And that's something that I do pay a little bit of attention to. The same thing, people get worried about Damian Williams and how he's going to cut into David Montgomery's workload. Well, Damian Williams has been taking all of his snaps with the second team. So that's kind of what I look at, is who is practicing with who. But outside of that, when somebody says that they're in the best shape of their life, or they're going to see more touches, or they're going to be more involved in the passing game, you hear that about everybody this time of year. So I don't put too much faith in those stories.
I will plug one more account I was thinking of. There's an account at 32 beat writers, the number 32 beat writers, and they tend to retweet a bunch of stuff from all 32 teams beat writers. I like that account.
I like that. Yeah, and I forgot to plug the Bears guys, which Brad Biggs has been around forever. He's one of the best ones out there. And then Adam Johns is a newer guy. He just popped up on the scene a few years ago. He writes for The Athletic. He's a great guy as well. Those are 2 guys that it seems like they have pretty good information, and I've also seen them in the past call out what they believe to be BS rumors, where somebody says something and they go, no. That is not happening. Delete this tweet. So, those are the guys, Adam Johns and Brad Biggs, if you're interested in who to follow for the Bears. All right. So we got a bunch of keeper questions last week, and we've still got some coming in as people are prepping for draft season. We got Brian Sweet asking us here, who are you keeping in a 12-team Superflex league? You can keep Kyler Murray in the first round. You can keep Robby Anderson in the 12th round, or in the 13th round, keeping Chase Edmonds, Nyheim Hines, or Russell Gage. Troy, who are you keeping out of this bunch?
I'm making it easy. Kyle Murray. And it's not, for me, it's like, look, Edmonds, Nyheim Hines, Gage. Nah, like, look, 13th round is that value? Yeah, sure. But for me, I'm not an Edmonds guy. I believe that, him and Connor, I don't know what this usage is going to be. I believe there's a lot of hype around Edmonds, but no, thank you. I don't know what that split's going to be. Robby Anderson. I like Robby Anderson, and I think it's very good value, right? But Kyle Murray, I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up being QB1 this year, right? He has that ability. So for me, you're just drafting him where he deserves to be drafted, right? He'd probably consensus top 3-4 pick in Superflex league. So don't make it complicated. Get one of the best quarterbacks in Superflex, Kyle Murray.
I like it. Who are you keeping here, Victoria? Shaking your head.
No, Superflex. I mean, that is the only answer, right? I mean, you're gonna take him in the first already. I personally have him ranked as the QB1 for the season. I'm all in on Murray, and somebody like Robby Anderson, like Troy said, is a good value, but it's Superflex and Kyler Murray, dude. Like, that is easy. Done. Troy said it all.
I wish we can go 3 for 3 here, but for me personally, you can draft somebody in the first round and you can still get another elite quarterback. You've got quarterbacks out there. Yeah. So I think that if you've got, he knows what the draft position is. So I'm just going to throw a different take out there. If he's top 5 in his draft, I would recommend keeping either Chase Edmonds or Nyheim Hines and then drafting another quarterback. And the reason for that, I think that those guys just have sky high ceilings, and getting them in the 13th round is a phenomenal value. I think that Chase Edmonds could smash his ADP, and there's some risk there, but you're not going to get him in the 13th round of a draft, where you can still get, if he's got an early pick, you can still get Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or maybe one of those other quarterbacks. So I get the argument for Kyler Murray, but I also love Chase Edmonds this year, so I think he's worth a late round dart throw if you've got an early enough pick that you can swap out Kyler Murray for another effective top tier quarterback. Sorry, guys. I wish we could have all agreed on that.
Look. I get it. Look, Chase Edmonds is a lot. Like, I'm not saying it's fair. It's very, very good value for him, right? I just think people are going to be disappointed thinking everybody wants Chase Edmonds to be RB1 season. RB1 last year. We saw what happened. He was okay when Kenyon Drake got hurt, but it wasn't anything like crazy impressive. He got a lot of volume. He didn't do a lot with it, right? And then this year, James Conner is going to be more of a factor than people would like for Chase Edmonds. So I'm just saying, y'all, the people
Conner
who are
trade.
And look, guys, just temper your expectations. He might disappoint you, and it's okay. I'll be here to, give you your tissues and all that, just so y'all know.
No, I fully admit that there's risk in taking Chase Edmonds, but I think that his ceiling is just so high. Like, he truly has RB1 potential. And you talked about it when he stepped in for Kenyon Drake last year. He was very good. Well, guess what? James Conner has never played 16 games in his career. Not once has he been able to make it through a full season healthy. So we're going to see that opportunity for Chase Edmonds, almost assuredly at some point this season. And hopefully he can, grapple that role away from James Conner a little bit better than he could last year from Kenyon Drake. Anyway, a lot of time spent on that question, so let's keep it rolling here. Brian Fisher, do you prefer safer picks or risky picks early in your draft? This is a good question. Victoria, do you want to start us off with this? Are you chasing upside or are you chasing floor?
Yeah, this is a loaded question. So I think back when I read this, I think back to last season, and I was easing off Dalvin Cook, a guy who people were labeling as injury prone. He's not going to play 16 games, and he's a concern. And then he smashed, and I didn't have many shares of him, and that made me sad. And I was, it depends. You think of someone like Saquon this year. The reports are coming out. He's unsure if he's going to be there week 1. If you see the upside kind of as he might hit massively like I just described Dalvin Cook, you have to take some risk in this game. I hate that word injury prone, and I don't want to throw that around, but usually the risky picks are where you're going to hit because Dalvin Cook wasn't going as a top 2 running back last year. It depends on your it depends on your scale of risk. If you like to be safe and go toward more consensus, and you want to have like a Zeke Elliott and say, hey, he's been one of the most consistent running backs in the league, maybe he'll get me 18 to 20 points a week. It is what it is. But after kind of failing on the Dalvin Cook thing last year, I'm definitely taking more risk this year.
I love that you called out that Dalvin Cook thing because Hayden Winks tweeted this out this morning, and it was the best ball win rate from last year. And there was one guy that was on more rosters than any other winning best ball teams, and it was Dalvin Cook because so many people were scared about him, and he started dropping down into the first round. And anybody that took that risk on him at the 5th through 10th pick, and then earlier in the season when there was the holdout scare, he was dropping into the 4th and 5th round. So if you were able to lock in Dalvin Cook last year, you set yourself up pretty well in fantasy football. But sorry, just wanted to plug that real quickly. Troy, what do you prefer? Ceiling or floor plays with your early picks?
Early picks, look, if you don't hit on your first and second round picks, then most likely you're not going to be winning your draft. Yes, you can play the waiver wire, you can do a bunch of things, but if you don't hit early, you're going to struggle most weeks. So for me, I want the guy that I know is going to, again, obviously nothing's guaranteed, so I'm not saying that, but I want the guys that I know I'm going to get points from, right? Who's going to be on the field. So I'm much more inclined to get, a safer pick, maybe like a Travis Kelce, maybe like a Kamara, maybe like a Derrick Henry, someone like that. I'm like, all right, I got you. I don't have to worry, right? And yes, everyone can get injured. But for me, I'm like, all right, these guys are going to get me a certain amount of points every single week. They're less risky. I'm going to go for risk later on in my draft because that's where all the nonsense is, right? That's where all like the, upside plays. Again, like we talk about upside, you looking for any upside, right? You trying to find anybody late in drafts that could possibly be that X factor. So I'm going to go riskier later and then, safer earlier.
What you just said is making me completely change how I was going to answer this question because I realized that everybody's idea of risky and safe is so differently because I think Kamara, Kelce, and Henry are three of the riskiest picks in the first round. Kamara's got the quarterback change that you don't know what's going on with. Henry has this insane usage. Yeah, Henry's got this insane usage over the last few years. He could break down at any moment. And then Kelce, that Kelce's safe, as far as being tight end. But I think that you can get Darren Waller and George Kittle in the 2nd or 3rd round, and they're going to be right there with Travis Kelce. So, this question and this discussion that we just had made me realize that everybody's idea of what risk is completely different. Because for me, the risky first round picks were Jonathan Taylor. We don't know what his workload is going to look like, where other people are saying we saw what his workload is going to be like, and he's as safe as you can get in the first round. And Saquon, the other guy we talked about, I think that he'd be a pretty safe one as far as, the upside that you get later on in the year. Other people are terrified because of the ACL injury. So this discussion just made me realize that everybody's idea of risk is very, very different.
Well, and I'll say, look, the safest pick that you could have possibly made last year was CMC. And we all know how that turned out, right? So we all think, and again, like it's really, we don't know, right? But I like to normally, draft the guy that I know, right? So just like CEH, right? I didn't have a lot of CEH. To me, CEH was a risky pick last year. And obviously it didn't turn out that great. But, those other guys who are more established, I have somewhat of an idea what they're going to do. That's normally where I like to go.
I like it. All right, we got a question here from Mike Silvestri. Are you locking in a top 5 quarterback in your drafts, or are you waiting to draft one? I just want to point out the top 5. I think everyone kind of knows who that is this year. It seems like there's a pretty big tier fall off after Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, and oh my God, why am I blanking? Dak Prescott. That's your top 5 right there. So are you trying to lock in one of those guys, or are you taking the old school late round quarterback approach? Troy, why don't you start us off with this?
Okay, so I'm gonna be hedging on this question, right? So because we had a similar question, I think, a couple shows ago, and Dave made me change my mind on this a little bit. Because here's the thing, I do like to have a good quarterback starting every single week, like a plug and play guy that I don't have to worry about. So I think it really depends on how my team looks early on, right? I think it depends on some of the pieces. But yes, I would much rather have a Patrick Mahomes start than relying on somebody, a random dude like a streamer. But at the same time, it makes a lot of sense to wait on quarterback, build your roster up with the running backs and your wide receivers. and then wait, because you can get a decent quarterback that's not a QB5, but if you got Tom Brady or Matt Stafford and plug them in, that's perfectly fine. You can easily win with that. So I'm probably more prone to wait a little bit on quarterback, because again, if I played Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, Jalen Hurts, like those kind of guys, they're going to give me consistent fantasy points. But I do like the appeal of having a Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray as well. So I'm hedging a bit, but I'll say I'll go more the late side.
All right. What are you doing here, Victoria? I mean, obviously you're getting Josh Allen wherever you can.
Oh my gosh, that's literally the first thing I was thinking. That's going to break my heart that I can't have him on every one of my teams this year. I had him on so many teams last year. It's wonderful. And of course, this question depends on just how your draft board falls and where the value is, and especially like my home leagues. If somebody like Jalen Hurts is going to fall because my league mates watched a couple of his games last year and they can't stand him and they think he's going to fall on his face, well, I'm going to wait and take the value later. But it just depends. As Troy said, I think I'd be okay with Stafford later, especially with the Akers injury. I expect him to throw even more passes this year. But just I need to wait and see how the board is falling to see if I'm willing to give up a value in the third or fourth, like a really good wide receiver or a running back there. I did want to say something on Lamar, though, because I usually wait on quarterback. And last year I was like, you know what? Screw this. Lamar, that's it. Second round or third round, however high it was going, and burned me terribly. So you really are likely, it stinks, but you're likely to get burned if you are taking one in like the second round, especially because there's so much more value there. And there's the tier break. I agree with the top 5 tier break, but after that, I mean, what if Carson Wentz just gets you by and you get that value of those top running backs and wide receivers, and then Wentz is just getting you by because your other players are exploding?
Yeah. Before Dave goes again, I want to say something, right? So the magic of winning a lot of fantasy leagues is finding that late round quarterback that becomes a QB1. Justin Herbert.
Yep.
Lamar Jackson before that, Josh Allen, right? So that's what it is. So that's where the late strategy is better, because normally the teams that come into playoffs win the championships wait on quarterback and just hit on that QB that just happens to, end up being QB1. All right, Dan.
Yeah, and this year it could be, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, all these rookies,
Wilson.
Trey Lance. I mean, who knows? Nobody expected Justin Herbert last year, and I'm just throwing it out there. These rookies, the way that they translate into the pros is always so questionable. You don't know what to expect. So I think that if you can get one of those young guys late that hits, it absolutely helps you. And my mindset, I really wanted these top quarterbacks this year because I felt like there was a tier break after. But as I'm doing drafts, I noticed these guys are starting to creep further and further up the board. You used to be able to get Dak Prescott and Lamar Jackson in the 6th round, and that's almost impossible at this point. Those guys aren't anywhere to be found. Everybody wants those top 5. So what I've been doing is kind of changing my approach just over the last couple of weeks here. And there's a few guys that I like drafting a little bit later. Jalen Hurts, Ryan Tannehill, Russell Wilson. And the reason I call those guys out is because they still have that, little bit of rushing upside. And that rushing upside just bakes in such a nice floor for you every single week. If somebody's going to be rushing, sprinkling some touchdowns in here and there, that helps a ton. So, well, Jalen Hurts, that might be a 2 or 3 win Eagles team. I think that he's still going to be, a lock for being a QB1, and you can get him a little bit later. So I think it depends how your draft is shaking out. If everyone's going QB crazy and they start taking Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen in the 2nd and 3rd round, then I'm probably going to wait. But if they drop where, I've already got 2 running backs and I've got a tight end and I've got a wide receiver, and then one of those top 5 guys is still available, then I'm okay pulling the trigger. But it just doesn't seem like that's really happening now. People are taking these top quarterbacks before they're filling out the rest of their roster, and that's not something that I feel comfortable with. DeAndre Hopkins, and I'm going to start. So this is a question from Al Callow, and I'm going to start you with this one, Troy, because you just wrote a great article on DeAndre Hopkins. Al is asking, what is DeAndre Hopkins' dynasty outlook? Is he at his peak value right now, or would you hold him for a little bit longer and hope to get a haul? What would you do? I mean, I know your article was more focused on 2021, but you're the DeAndre Hopkins guy now, so run with it, Troy.
Yeah, apparently I am. Look, DeAndre Hopkins, he's one of the best wide receivers in the league. If you hold on to him, you're not getting a haul. So I'm gonna stop you right there, Al. Like he's not going to increase in value, right? He's only going to decrease at this point. So I feel like if you're going to sell him, right now is the time to sell him, right? Because he's 29 years old. He's about to hit 30. We already know that. Dynasty perception of wide receivers who hit 30, nobody wants them. So this is the perfect time to sell if you're going to sell DeAndre Hopkins. Now, he's going to be productive for the next few years, right? He does not showing any signs of slowing down. I know sometimes the cliff, comes at a lot of people fast, but DeAndre Hopkins is just different. He's one of the elites. I think he has at least, 2-3 years of, very fantasy relevant seasons. But if you're going to sell him now.
What are you thinking, Victoria? What's your plan with DeAndre Hopkins?
Perfect answer. I had the same thing. I think he as well has 2 to 3 more years of fantastic output left in him. If you want to sell him, again, like Troy said, this is his peak value. If you hold, you're not going to get any more value. He's not going to do any. What could he possibly do better than he already has to increase his value? So yeah, if you're going to sell him now.
Yeah, and my thing is I wouldn't sell him, and I realize that there are very different, strategies and game theories on how to play Dynasty. But you've got a guy in DeAndre Hopkins that is arguably the best wide receiver in the league, and we've seen Julio Jones now in his 30s still pumping out solid games, and health might be an issue and availability, whatever. But I think DeAndre Hopkins is one of those guys that is going to continue balling out, and I think a lot of people haven't even really become like privy to the idea of how good this guy is, because he was a very good wide receiver when he was playing early on in Houston and had this nonstop carousel of quarterbacks. But since Deshaun Watson was drafted in Houston, and now since last year, what we saw with Kyler Murray, he has turned into a bona fide superstar. His per 16 game pace is over 1,400 yards per season, and he's averaging almost 10 touchdowns per season. So, I mean, the case for him being the wide receiver one is a very, very easy one to make. And it's not like, next year he's just going to suddenly fall off. Like, he's still going to be in the conversation for the wide receiver one next year, and probably the following year. He's still got some left in the tank. So I think if you've got DeAndre Hopkins, you just ride that until the wheels fall off. But I realize that there's a lot of people that like getting rid of players and selling them at their peak and trying to cash in. So if that's how you want to play the game, go for it. But I'm keeping DeAndre Hopkins personally.
I'm not mad at you for that.
So we got a question here from Abe over at DFS Docket. Again, thanks for tuning in, Abe. We see you in the chat every week and appreciate it. He goes, do you prefer talent or opportunity when drafting running backs? And the two examples that he used in his question were Josh Jacobs and Mike Davis, who have very similar ADPs. Josh Jacobs is a first-round pick that's probably going to be splitting carries. And then Mike Davis is this 28, 29-year-old journeyman who hadn't done anything prior to last year, but now it looks like he's got the stage set to have a pretty decent season in Atlanta with little competition. So, Victoria, start us off. What do you look after, talent or opportunity?
I don't think it's just those two things, though. Obviously, I'm weighing those, but what about volume, expected volume? Dave, you mentioned that Josh Jacobs is going to be splitting with Kenyon Drake. That's our assumption here. You look at a guy, you can argue about Najee Harris. Is his offensive line going to hold him back? Sure, but he's going to garner a ton of touches. Volume is king. Somebody like Derrick Henry, same thing. I'm also looking at volume. That's probably where I'm ranking volume, opportunity, and talent likely, because we know there's talented guys all over the field. That doesn't mean they get the opportunity to ball out. So do I have to answer the question, Josh Jacobs or Mike Davis? Because this is gross.
I think those he said, guys that have talent like Josh Jacobs or guys that have opportunity like Mike Davis.
Sure.
It's not between those two guys. I just want to know kind of who you're going with here. Or I'm sorry, like what you prefer. And I think that if you're saying volume, I think the volume kind of gets lumped in with opportunity.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think those are pretty similar enough.
And then that's my answer. I absolutely opportunity / volume.
All right, Troy, what are you going with?
Okay, so if I'm looking at this as a season-long thing, then I'm going talent. If I'm just throwing thing week to week, I'm looking at opportunity, right? If I'm just trying to win the week and I'm like trying to figure out which guy I'm going to start, I'm looking at opportunity. Like, all right, like let me, and also, obviously defensive matchup. There's a bunch of factors. But if I'm just drafting somebody for the season, give me the guy who's more talented, because I believe that overall they're going to, one, eventually get that opportunity plus their talent. But if I'm just looking at a guy like on a week-to-week basis, I'm more so looking for opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's great because we've seen that a lot of times in the past where it's this guy that like we think is going to be a bell cow. Like the guy that most recently comes to mind is Damian Williams, where it's like, was Damian Williams really that great of a player? Like,
He
no,
was.
probably not.
He was good. Sorry, it was opportunity. It was
Come on.
opportunity. He's fine.
I mean, you made me think of AJ Brown too.
Yeah, AJ Brown.
Sorry.
Yeah, another guy.
Yeah.
But you know what? The guy I'm thinking of, and the example that I thought of when I read this question was Damian Williams. And so many people, like, at that point in his career, he had been in the league for a couple of years. He hadn't done much in Miami, and he had this opportunity that really helped him out and helped him be, pretty good for a couple of games at the end of the 2018 season. And then heading into 2019, everyone saw this opportunity and said, well, this is it. Like, nobody was excited about Damian Williams. Like, he wasn't a top level athlete or anything like that, but it was, he's tied to a powerhouse offense and he's going to be the lead back. And then what happened? The coaching staff realized
MVP.
Exactly, he should have been. And but then what happened is they brought in LaShawn McCoy, a more talented running back at that time. So I think that's kind of the fear is that
at that time, no. Look, I mean, it was washed. LaShawn was washed at that time. All right,
I mean, Damian Williams wasn't, some young fried chicken himself. I mean, those were two guys that. But what I'm getting at is that people that aren't talented, you're not going to be able to hold on to a role for 17 weeks. So like you said, the opportunity week to week when you got those guys like Devontae Booker and Mike Boone that pop up, yeah, you're going to play them because that they're going to get 20, 25 touches, but you can't expect somebody like that to hold onto a starting role for a full season. So I think that you've got to look at talent a little bit. And that's why, there's some backup running backs that I really, really like drafting late in drafts. A.J. Dillon and Tony Pollard are two that jump to mind. Darrell Henderson was another one, prior to yesterday. And it's because those guys are very talented. And I think that when you're talented, the coaching staff has to find a way to get the ball in your hands. So even though A.J. Dillon isn't going to be the starter, he's not going to be an RB1. I think that he's still going to find a way to carve out a decent role for himself just because he's a very good player and they have to get the ball to him. So I'd lean towards opportunity a little bit, or I'm sorry, I'd lean towards talent a little bit when drafting than the perceived opportunity. And, with what we were talking about, Mike Davis, I kind of see the writing on the wall, and I think it's because I got burned with Damian Williams. But like, I think Mike Davis is not going to make it into week one as a starter. I think they bring in Adrian Peterson or Duke Johnson, somebody that is going to, not take over as the lead back, but do enough to make Mike Davis not live up to his ADP. And it's just because Mike Davis, I don't think he's all that talented. And right now, people are drafting him because of the opportunity. All right, this is a fun one. And this is always fun to talk about. What wide receiver threes have wide receiver one upside? Whichever one of you wants to start. Who's got somebody they want to talk about here?
Victoria, you could go first.
Ooh, I'm looking at underdog ADP since, everything else is kind of unreliable right now. Deontay Johnson is sitting at the wide receiver 25, so that's legal to talk about. He was last season in his healthy games from weeks 1 through 16. He averaged 12 targets, 75 yards, and just about 19 PPR points per game. Again, you can argue this is a good talent versus opportunity argument. I mean, those stats alone, he would have slotted in as the wide receiver 5 in points per game between Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins. I know that sounds a little unbelievable, but he's got Big Ben back at the helm. He's got a horrible offensive line. Big Ben's just going to dump. He's the beneficiary of those dump-off passes, those quick passes that Big Ben's going to have to fire out because of the line being very bad. And he dropped like 16 passes last year. We get it, but that's a completely volatile, unpredictable statistic. Don't let it scare you off. All that good stuff. I think somebody that I really like, which I don't even think he's being drafted, highly likely not being drafted as a wide receiver 3, Devonta Smith, already the best offensive weapon on the Eagles roster, likely lead them in targets. I think he's got a good opportunity to shine. I'm not sure it's wide receiver 1 material, but I'm excited to see what he can do this year.
I love it. I think Devontae Smith. Yeah, people are snoozing. Like, people still think about his BMI, but like
my gosh,
the only rookie. He's the only rookie that walks into a situation where he is going to be like the unquestioned wide receiver 1 on his team.
Absolutely.
But Troy, who are the wide receiver 3s that you think have wide receiver 1 upside?
I have a couple.
Don't say Preston Williams, man. I can't talk about
Oh,
Preston Williams anymore.
Chill, bro. I have not talked about Preston Williams all season.
I know.
Man, you hate it. All right, there's a couple.
It's getting hot in here.
We got Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase, I think, is an easy one in terms of like wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 1 upside. You got, look, OBJ. I know that might be controversial, but people are forgetting that he's still one of the best wide receivers in the league, right? So OBJ, I think he's a value. Again,
Don't do it.
No, listen. Is it likely that he's going to finish at wide receiver 1? No. But the question is wide receiver 3s with wide receiver 1 upside. There's not a lot of them. You got, Chase Claypool. Obviously we know he's had so many big games, and he could easily finish like a wide receiver 1 every single week just because of his upside. And you got guys like, I have 2 more. Will Fuller, he's presumed to be the wide receiver 1 of the Dolphins. So if everything goes according to plan, we know the Dolphins have been practicing taking shots down the field. So what we've seen Will Fuller be a wide receiver 1 before. And lastly, Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks, we know that. Answer. Like, look, Brandon Cooks, look at who else is on the Houston Texans. They ain't got nobody. And Brandon Cooks has consistently been a top wide receiver throughout his entire career and is always disrespected. So those are my guys.
Yeah, I think the thing with Brandon Cooks for me is when you look at who his previous quarterbacks have been, this guy's got to play with Drew Brees and Tom Brady and Deshaun Watson, and now this year he's going in with
Jared Goff.
Yeah, true. I mean, he did have some times in the Rams, but he's really been a beneficiary of playing with some great quarterbacks. So I think that there's some risk there, but absolutely he's got that wide receiver 1 upside. Something I want to call out real quickly is just that of all the guys that finished as wide receiver 1 last year, 50% of them were drafted after the 4th round. So this is a very, actionable question, because a lot of these guys that are getting drafted as wide receiver 3s right now are going to finish as wide receiver 1s. Who it's going to be? I mean, that's what we're trying to figure out. If we knew the answer, we'd all be making a lot of money. But unfortunately, it's throwing darts. And I love the Claypool call out, because we know that this guy is just a freak of nature. I think that he can have that DK Metcalf type second-year breakout. The only thing that can really hold him back would be Big Ben's arm potentially. Courtland Sutton is another guy that I've talked about a ton. I think that he's just got that, build to be an alpha. We've seen him just taking over games with poor quarterback play in the past. So I don't know exactly who the quarterback's going to be there, but he showed success with Drew Lock. Drew Lock really likes him, so I think that he's got the potential. And then Robby Anderson is another guy that we talked about earlier. And I know everybody's still high on DJ Moore, and DJ Moore is the guy that's getting drafted beforehand. But Robby Anderson already has a rapport with Sam Darnold. Robby Anderson was the leader in targets last year, the leader in yards last year, and he finished just outside of RB1 territory last year. And people are still sleeping on him. Right now, he's like the 35th wide receiver going off the board. So Robby Anderson's the guy that I'm really targeting.
And he's reunited with Sam Darnold. You're right. He was a wide receiver 1 a lot of the season last year. So that's a good call. I gotta give you some props for that one.
All right. I appreciate that, man. All right. We're going to our last submitted question. So be sure to start firing those questions off in the group chat or in the chat. We've already seen a few fun ones pop up that I'm looking forward to get to. But let's hit our last question here. We got this one from our boy Scott Simpson. He's saying, who is the better late round running back selection? Nyheim Hines or Jamaal Williams? Troy, start us off. Who are you taking here?
Scott, I love you, man, but it's Nyheim Hines. It's Nyheim Hines for multiple reasons, right? We even saw it last year. Like, obviously, JT, he sees the job, but they used Nyheim Hines in multiple situations, not just passing down, but they gave him plenty of rushes and rushes on the goal line. And I know Marlon Mack's back, but I believe Nyheim Hines is still going to be very involved in the offense. And also, he just has a better offense, better offensive line. Nyheim Hines, Jamaal Williams, he's on the Detroit Lions, who are trending down. And look, I know that Anthony Lynn mentioned 1A, 1B. Stop it, right? Like he'll be okay. Like, he's gonna get a couple carries, but I have not drafted in Jamaal Williams. I hope he does fine because I like him as a personality, but it's Nyheim Hines.
What about you, Victoria? Hines or Williams?
If we're talking about who's the better dancer here now, it's definitely Jamaal Williams. Who's better at being hilarious? It's Jamaal Williams. Better late round running back selection, Nyheim Hines all the way. PPR running back 15 last year. I was looking this up. I'm like, oh, he was 24, 25. 15! I looked that up. My goodness. And they were using him more when they were easing in Taylor, but they were also winning a ton. If they're not winning as much this year, if something goes wrong with Wentz, if the offensive line isn't as good without Anthony, I don't know how you say his last name. Goodness gracious, I'm blanking. But their left tackle retired. I mean, you never know. So Hines easily.
Yeah. I don't really understand what's going on in the fantasy community and why everybody's getting carried away with this Detroit Lions offense. And
It's the comment Troy mentioned, the 1A, 1B. Like,
I mean,
I don't know.
when Troy was like, stop it, get some help. The Michael Jackson, oh my God, Michael Jordan meme. Just stop it, get some help.
Yeah, it's I don't know, man. It's weird that people are getting carried away with this team. I'm not really seeing it with the Detroit Lions. It's Nyheim Hines for me. Hopefully you got your good answer here, Scott. You got 3 for 3. All of us are agreeing. I think
Finally, that was the first one on show.
The first stamp of approval. You got Nyheim Hines over Jamaal Williams. Yeah, even if he's not playing that primary role, he's still going to get touches. They like to work him in the passing game. They like to use him near the goal line. Nyheim Hines doesn't need an injury to be relevant, where Jamaal Williams needs DeAndre Swift to go down for him to be a weekly starter. Nyheim Hines is somebody that you can flex season long without even thinking twice. All right, before we hit these questions in the chat, though, I just want to remind everyone that you need to sign up for a Footballguys daily email if you haven't already. Every day, Joe Bryant, the owner and founder of Footballguys, will bring you all of the latest from Footballguys. We go through news, transactions, rumors, and then all of the articles and shows that are brought to you. Great way to start the day. I seriously go through that entire email before I even get out of bed every morning, and I've been doing that since well before I was on the Footballguys staff, so be sure to check that out if you haven't already. Now let's go through here, and we'll start off with this question from Matthew, which is blocking Troy's whole face, so let me read this.
It's fine.
Is there a case to be made for Austin Eckler? Okay. Is there a case to be made for Austin Eckler over Alvin Kamara if Taysom Hill starts? Eckler gets former Saints offensive coordinator and a massive improvement on the offensive line, whereas the red flags seem to be adding up for Kamara on a declining Saints team. Victoria, I know you love you some Austin Eckler, so start us off with this. Would you take Austin Eckler over Alvin Kamara if Taysom Hill starts?
So I believe Kamara had 7. It was either 7 receptions or 7 targets over multiple games with Taysom Hill. It scared me. Yes, thank you so much, Dave. That's scary. He was getting 9 targets per game with Drew Brees. So that's very scary to me. And then I look out the other side. Of course, I'm a little biased. Austin Eckler is my guy. Check out my article I just put out today with Footballguys. Let's go. First article. Shameless plug. But Austin Eckler, when he came back from injury last year, 16 targets in the first game back with Herbert. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I think he's going to pop off this year. I wouldn't be scared to go for him over Kamara. It's a little bit of a risky pick like we talked earlier, but sky's the limit.
What about you, Troy?
I don't want to answer this. Look, man. Okay. I think I would still go Kamara, but I would regret it. I'm giving Kamara. I think I'm still gonna go Kamara because
He's still gonna ball.
Because you know what it is. I'm sorry. They realize that they can't. They did that last year, but I think even with Taysom Hill, they realize that's not formula for success. They know that they need to get Kamara involved in the passing game. They have a whole offseason if Taysom Hill's the guy. So I believe that he's going to be much higher in terms of targets every game. So I'm going to still go Kamara, but I hate it.
Yeah, man, I got these guys at 6 and 7 in my rankings, with Alvin Kamara hardly above Austin Eckler. And I think that Kamara is good enough that regardless of who the starter is, if it's Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill, I think that he's still I think that his value isn't going to be affected all that much. I think that losing Drew Brees dings his value quite a bit, and I don't think it really matters if it's Jameis or Hill starting. So I would still take Alvin Kamara ahead of Austin Eckler. I mean, the guy's he's so talented, he's so slippery, he's so hard to bring down, and he's going to be involved in the passing game. I think the biggest thing that would kind of set them apart is risk for injury. Alvin Kamara has had a much cleaner bill of health than Austin Eckler has had throughout his career. So that's why I'd give him the slight edge, but that's a good question and a pretty tough decision to make that I think we were all struggling with a little bit.
If I was in my draft and it was up to those two, I would have a tough time for sure.
Let's real quickly, we talked about this a little bit. Or I guess we already answered this. Offered 2022 first for Akers. Troy's taking it. I don't think Victoria and I are, so we'll move on to the next one. which Abe, who asked us a submitted question, is now asking which of us three would win in a bar fight. You guys answer this while I look for the next question in the chat.
Like
Victoria,
against
who's
each
winning?
other or against somebody else?
Apparently.
Like, who are we fighting?
As a gentleman,
no weapons. The three of us bare knuckle.
As a gentleman, I'll let Victoria win. If I wasn't being a gentleman, I just wouldn't fight Victoria and I would beat up Dave. So
yes, great answer. Next question.
All right. Ooh, I like this one. Why shouldn't I be ranking Antonio Gibson ahead of Jonathan Taylor? I don't know if you're not gonna get a good strong argument from me or Victoria. What about you, Troy? You got a good argument for Jonathan Taylor ahead of Gibson?
I just think okay. Man. Okay. So I am drafting JT over Antonio Gibson. The reasons why I'm doing it is because that's a good question. I just feel like, look, I know both of them have opportunity, right? I just think that JT, I just believe is going to get the more volume, right? I know that Antonio Gibson is going to get more volume than he did last year, but they still had JD McKissick, which I know that he's not going to get the target that he got, but I believe that he's still going to be involved in the offense. I don't think it's all the running back or I don't think Antonio Gibson is just going to just be like a workhorse, right? Or everyone would be drafting him in the first round, right? If we really all believe that he'd be drafted in the first round.
What about Nyheim Hines? You scared of JD McKissick? This man? What about
No. I'm just saying that the offense, and also, I think I see Ryan Fitzpatrick just be like, they got Terry, they got Curtis Samuel. I see them being more pass heavy. I see the Colts being more run heavy. I think they're going to filter through the run, and I think JT is going to be the guy. He's going to be guy on the goal line. He's going to be the guy getting the carries, and then after that, like the pass is secondary. I wouldn't be surprised if Washington, was again. I know Fitzpatrick, right? And I just see him being a gunslinger down the field, and I think Antonio Gibson is going to benefit, but I just wouldn't take him over JT. I like the question, and I understand everybody how they feel, but I'm still ranking JT over.
It's a tough one.
Great answer. That was
hard. I hate it,
man.
God, can y'all answer me some easy ones?
I mean, like realistically, I've got Jonathan Taylor. I had to check my rankings on this one, and I've got
you have him before.
I do, just by a hair, and I've got him at 11, and then I've got Jonathan Taylor at 14. But with the way my rankings are, I mean, I just don't have a lot of Jonathan Taylor because there's some other guys that I like to ahead of him. Like
you have to take him so late or so early. That's the thing. You can get Gibson and wait, and JT you have to take with like a top 7 or 8 pick if you're.
Sorry, I don't have any team with JT on it.
Yeah. So realistically, I mean, if I'm looking at those two, I might pull the trigger on Gibson, but it's a tough one for me because usually if Jonathan Taylor's still on the board, there's usually still Aaron Jones or Joe Mixon or other guys that I like ahead of him. And then usually when it's the early second, if I've got that first, second, or third pick in the second round, I am A-okay taking Antonio Gibson right there. So, people are usually just beating me to the punch on Jonathan Taylor. So I haven't really had to come to that decision yet. But, if that's a tough question, man. I like that. I think Rod's been watching the show every week, and he knows who we like and who we don't like. I think he set us up for that one. I like this one from Diego here. We'll answer this one quickly. If you had to impress your viewers with a meal, what would you cook? Are either you guys cooks? You guys have like one dish that you can whip up, or is that not your thing?
I'd attempt to make my grandma my Nona sauce and meatballs, and it'd be pretty tough because it's intimidating. You're like, is this going to turn out as well? But I've done it a couple of times, so I think it'd be that. I know it sounds not so crazy, but that's my favorite.
What would you do, Troy?
I would do my buffalo mac and cheese. I don't pull it out very often, but if y'all wanted to see something, buffalo mac and cheese.
Yeah, it's like Kraft mac and cheese that comes in a box. Put 4 drops of buffalo sauce in there.
Look, Dave's gonna get me unfollowed. Yes. You really think I do that?
Cooter in the chat, hamburger helper, let's go.
And I would, I'd bring one of my wife's pies. She makes great pies. That's what I bring to the table. I'm a frozen pizza guy through and through. Wish I had a better answer for you there, Diego, but appreciate the question. This is a good one. Back to football. If Melvin Gordon is cut or traded to the Rams, which there has been some buzz about, where should Javonte Williams be drafted? Also, does Mike Boone become draftable or relevant in that scenario? I'll take this one because this is something that, I have thought about quite a bit. And I think that Javonte Williams instantly slides in like the top 15 conversation. I mean, this dude is so talented. He is so good. And this is a team that likes to run the ball. And I think that Mike Boone, he probably starts going in like the 14th or 15th round, but he's not somebody that anybody gets especially excited about. I think that people still have that kind of sour taste in their mouth when it comes to Mike Boone because of that week where he was supposed to fill in for Dalvin Cook in the championship matchup and laid an egg. So I don't know if the fantasy community is ever going to warm up to Mike Boone again unless we see a couple of good games out of him. But I think that Javonte Williams, if Melvin Gordon is gone, should be in the conversation as a top 15 running back. What do you guys think?
I was just looking at underdog ADP again, and I mean, running back 15, DeAndre Swift, 16 is Dobbins, 17 Carson, 14 was CEH. I mean, he could slot in front of any of those guys likely, and the hype will catapult him to that spot. I agree. And I would probably feel comfortable drafting him there. He's a talented dude, and they like to run the ball.
I would draft him right after Najee. So Najee's about 13. I draft him 14 because they're at that point in time, it's hard to make too many arguments. Like, why do you like Najee so much better than Javonte? They're gonna be right neck and neck. But I would take Najee just like a spot ahead of him in that case.
Yeah, I like both of those responses. We need to hire like a producer that can go through this chat because this show has been getting just the chat every single week. It's crazier and crazier, and trying to filter through there and find actual questions. I feel like I'm like half present for the end of the show. So we'll need somebody backstage to start managing some of these questions for us. Before we sign off, though, I want to remind you that if you're into shows like this, you're probably a pretty serious fantasy football player, and you need to get yourself a Footballguys premium membership. Whether it's redraft, dynasty, DFS, or anything else, we have got you covered. Go to footballguys.com. Click on the orange button in the top right corner and sign up today. We will do the work while you do all of the winning. Before we sign off, is there anything else that you guys wanted to talk about?
Man, that was a fun show, man. I appreciate everybody's questions in the chat. We were arguing and stuff, so you appreciate everybody, on YouTube, on Periscope, and all that. So just thank y'all for tuning in.
Yeah. Thank you, and we will see you next week. Just a reminder to go to youtube.com/FootballGuysTV. Subscribe there to get all of the newest Football Guys shows, which we will be bringing you through the offseason and through the regular season, which is getting so much closer. We're almost there. But we will see you next week, Wednesday at 7:30. Be sure to send those questions in to mailbag@footballguys.com, and we will get to them next week. Thank you.